Well, Kurt, here we are once again, PBT Extra, back in full swing as the NBA season rapidly approaches. We're into preseason, but we got to start off with the COVID drama, particularly with Kyrie Irving. We saw Andrew Wiggins. He was staunchly opposed to getting the vaccine. He ended up getting it. And Kyrie, there's still questions. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, the NBA has realized, look, first off, let's be fair to them. There are roughly 400, by the time they cut the rosters for the start of the season, 450 NBA players, give or take. 95% of them are vaccinated. I mean, we're talking about a couple dozen players tops who are going to be not vaccinated when the season starts. But Kyrie Irving is a big story because the Nets are the favorite, and Kyrie Irving is kind of always a big story anyway. It's interesting. The league knows it can't mandate it. So it put in, I think, it can't do what Disney did. And hey, if you want to work for Disney, you got to get vaccinated. And Walmart, all these people did that. But they can make it difficult. If you're not vaccinated, you can't leave the hotel room on the road. You can't, or leave the hotel on the road. You can't, dine with teammates. You're separated in the locker room. They took all these steps to make life more challenging. And all of that, plus the payday with Wiggins, was like, all right, I'll do it. And a lot of guys have done that since training camp started. Not Kyrie Irving. He's got the money. He's kind of got that defiant streak. It's really interesting. I thought the peer pressure of James Harden and Kevin Durant, like, hey, we're contenders. We are the contenders. I thought that would be the difference maker, but it doesn't seem to be, because all the word out of Brooklyn is they're kind of expecting him not to be around for at least the start of the season.
How do you think about this part-time player on the championship team? Because remember, Kyrie just did a 50-40-90 season, right?
Yeah.
He's averaging under 27 points a game. It's not like he's a small part of that team. How do you think him in a part-time role would affect their chances?
They're debating this, and I think it's worth actually asking. I'll ask you, would you do it, or would you say, Kyrie, you're either in or you're out? Because if he's just practicing on the road and just playing, again, that's 41 games on the road, assuming he plays all of them. That's a lot of games, and it gives you a chance to get Kevin Durant and James Harden some rest, which you want to do during the season. There's bound to be, hopefully nothing major, but look, everybody gets nicks and cut up and rolls an ankle and misses a week or whatever. Like, it's important for them to have him for those stretches if they can, but that's disruptive to the team. Would you want him in and out of the lineup like that?
Well, we know that Brooklyn team, how many lineups did they have throughout the whole year? It was kind of crazy. You look at last year, you have your star and Kevin Durant only playing something like 30-something games, right, because of injuries. Right. And he was still in the conversation for a second there on MVP, playing 30 games, all-star captain. You're like, wait, how does he have that much impact with only 30 games? So it's not, even with that team, it's not unreasonable to think that Kyrie could have an impact with under 40 games played. Which is still shocking, to put it out there. So from my perspective, I do think it's possible. But I think, once again, a lot can happen. A lot can change. We saw Andrew Wiggins' stance change, right? And it looked like that wasn't going to change, from all reports, right? But it ended up happening. So from my perspective, over the course of an entire season, a lot can happen.
Yeah, a lot can happen. And look, if it's without Kyrie Irving, this is still one of the top 3 teams in the NBA, 5 teams in the NBA. Wherever you want to end up drawing that line, they are still contenders with James Harden and Kevin Durant. It's just when you add Kyrie Irving into the mix, they become the favorite, the team to beat. They can go part of the season with this because they're such, and not just their star players. You go down that roster, it's veterans, right? It's all guys who have been around it, know what they're doing. This is not going to phase Blake Griffin. This is not going to phase Tony Parker. Not Tony Parker.
Patty Mills.
Patty Mills. Wrong Spurs guard. My bad. It's not going to phase. But it's not going to phase these veterans. They'll be able to handle him coming in and out of the lineup. They are not going to be thrown off by the distractions. Like if this happened with the Phoenix Suns or somebody that's kind of younger and upcoming, or the Atlanta Hawks, it would be, I think, a bigger issue on the court than it will be for Brooklyn.
And think about this. This is a crazy stat. It always blows my mind, Kurt. You think about James Harden and Kevin Durant played under 5 games together going into the playoffs. That's a crazy concept.
We
right?
still haven't really seen this team, right? We still haven't really seen this team. And what they bring this year with the addition of Patty Mills and other veterans off that bench is versatility. Look, we know 4 of the closing 5 in an ideal situation are Harden, Durant, Irving, and Joe Harris is shooting. But then you can mix and match that fifth guy to match up what you need. If you need size, you can put LaMarcus Aldridge out there, or you can put Blake Griffin out there. Or if you want defense, you've got Nick Claxton, or you can put Patty Mills. Like, you've got so many options to match up with whatever the other team throws at you with those four guys, plus make them adjust to you because Kevin Durant. Like, that is such a dangerous team, and it's not going to take them all season to get it together.
And once again, we don't have to, the league has done a great job getting vaccination rates high. This is only one or two outlier cases, and it just happens to be one of the star players on the championship team.
Hey,
so
they've done well, but not as well as the WNBA. Let's just say that 99% rate, man, that is impressive.
Well, they're always the leaders.
They are.
Let's go on to another rule change. So we have a rule change in the NBA, which I think is fascinating. It's the new foul baiting rule. So this whole concept of, if you're an offensive player, drawing fouls by inadvertently leaning into defenders. We've seen this popularized by guys like James Harden, who's taken it to the extreme and led the league in scoring. Or Trae Young is a great young player who's very, very talented at this. How do you think this will affect the way the game's played this year?
I think the game needed this. Steve Kerr talked about this. Like, we needed to get away from this. I thought his point was great, and I think I've made this one before. Like, if you're calling fouls or doing things that, if you did this on a pickup game at the Y, where you hooked the guy's arm and then went up into him and screamed foul, or leapt forward into the guy and screamed foul, like, there'd be fights. Right? there'd be a fight on the blacktop. And yet it's a foul in the NBA. I think they needed to do this. The pendulum had just swung too far towards the offense on some of those calls. And you saw it even in the preseason, by the way. The Warriors' first game, and I forget who the Portland defender was off the top of my head, leaps forward but stops short, and Curry took a long leap forward into that three, into him, and the ref did what they said they would do. It's a no call. I actually sat through a training with Monty McCutcheon and some other reporters on what they were going to call and not call. That's a no call now. If you leap forward into the guy and he's short, then they're just not going to call it. And Curry was like, where's the call? Where's the call? You're not going to get that. Players will adjust. It's like when they called the traveling, or they called hooking with arms a few years ago. Guys will adjust, but it's going to take a while. There's going to be some great plays at the start of the season when, Trae Young leaps backwards into a guy to try to draw a foul, and they're like, it's just not going to get it.
Yeah, it was very strategic, and you have to understand the mindset here. Where I remember watching or reading something about Kobe and how he was reading the referees' handbooks to understand where he could get away with certain things on the court, because depending on where the ball was, that's the referees have to align themselves. So if the ball's on the baseline, on the far baseline, the referees have to be in certain places. So then they're like, okay, well, there's not going to be a call because there's no line of sight here. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there are players who understand, who are students of the game, and realize that there are advantages, just like you can do with your own body, of like, okay, I'm going to do, ice baths, or have a training, or eating, nutrition, sleep. But there's also players who understand the ins and outs of the game from a rule standpoint and try to maximize that. James Harden was the best at that. He was the best at being a student of the game, to see where are there extra points on the floor. So what I'm curious to see is where's the loophole that we haven't seen. Yeah. I think James Harden's going to figure it out, because he, like I said, he is one of the smartest players in the game right now. So if anyone's going to figure out where are there going to be points left on the rule book, it's going to be James Harden.
And I think one thing to watch for, when I was going through the trade, the one thing that they're going to still call, picture Trae Young. He's coming off Clint Capella's pick. He gets around. He gets the defender on his back. He's very good at this. Chris Paul's very good at this, right? They get the defender on their back. If the defender's on your back, as the player with the ball, you are still allowed to stop whenever you want. If you have the ball and you just want to stop, that's your right. If you want to just go up with a shot from anywhere on the court, it is your right. I think some guys are going to figure out, especially some point guards, how to get some guys on their backs. James Harden will be able to do this. If I get the guy in the right position, I can legally just go up and he's going to foul me. And I think guys are going to get smarter about that, but they're not going to be able to do this, lean into the guy leaping sideways stuff that has been fouls for a while now.
And I also want to draw your attention, by the way, to the big men. We're seeing a rise in the big men generally. Jokic won the MVP. Joel Embiid was the other front runner. This is gonna, and obviously DeAndre Ayton, his rise in his career as a player. In my mind, we're gonna see a shift, because free throws, they are such a great way to change the pace in the game, to change the tempo, but also they're just free points, right? And it was always shifted in the guard's favor in the past decade or so, right? So now when you bring that back from the 3-point line, okay, you can't just get 3 easy free throws anymore. You can't just get any, like a mid-range jumper. You actually have to hit the jumper now. You're not going to get bailed out because someone's out of position, because once again, it's impossible to play defense in the NBA right now. If it's impossible to guard someone on the perimeter, it's even more impossible to guard them on the block. So if you have DeAndre Ayton, if you have Joel Embiid, like that's going to be where you make up those points. So I expect to see more people playing inside out now to take advantage of that.
Especially if they can get the switch, right? It's if you can get a smaller guy switched onto you, take advantage of that and try. And you're right, man. If I can get the fouls and I can hit the free throws, and not all, but a lot of bigs have come much better at that. Take advantage of it. Also, there's certain LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo. There's certain players who are really good at. They may not be centers, but you get them on the block, and good luck.
Good luck. Ben Simmons, we're learning a lot about the 76ers team. And without the one of the crown jewels of that franchise, I'd be curious to see your perspective on the holdout, on his demands for a trade, and what does this mean for the 76ers as the season rapidly approaches?
It's been fascinating to watch the kind of game right now. I will tell you, just talking to sources around the league, and I've heard this for a couple of weeks now, there's just not a lot of trade talk right now. There's no Simmons. I don't want to say they're not staying in touch. Like, people aren't occasionally calling Daryl Morey and checking in, but offers aren't changing. Nothing is changing. The situation's pretty flatline, which is really common, by the way, this point in the season. Everybody's in training camp. Everybody's optimistic. Everybody's set on their teams pretty much. And for a while now, remember James Harden got traded a year ago. It was a month into the season. I think we're going to get a little way into the season where a team's going to either be starting too slow or they have an injury or something will change that dynamic. But right now, I'll tell you, both sides, to use the battlefield terminology, this is a siege. This is both sides are dug in. It's trench warfare, and they're both trying to spin the media with, he is feeling pressure from not getting the checks or the fines that will be coming and not getting that $8.25 million up front. And the other side's like, no, he's not. He's fine. Look at all the problems with the 76ers without. They're both trying to spin it, but both sides are dug in and really right now, like firmly in their position. And until something changes with the trade offers, I don't know what changes, but what do you think that does, Corey, to the 76ers on the court at the start of the season?
Obviously, his talent level will be missed. But I'm curious, Kurt, because when I think about the franchise player, like James Harden was the guy they built around, right? I mean, they brought in pieces around him in Houston, right? And then when he said, I want to leave, that blew up the whole franchise and they're still recovering, trying to figure out what to do with John Wall's contract currently, right? When you think about the 76ers, it's not Ben Simmons' team. It's Joel's team. No. So what you're talking about is a very valuable piece, but it's not the franchise cornerstone. So from my perspective, there is this element of like, okay, well, obviously he's a very talented player. He's an all-star defensive player of the year candidate. I mean, runner-up. He's a great player and he's young and he has a skill set that's unique, right? But it's not his team. So it's going to be an interesting scenario, I think, dynamic-wise. But you'll see people fill in that role. And I think if the key for me is, can Joel stay healthy? Because if he can stay healthy, then Joel and Tobias, I think you have clear defined roles and it actually won't be as much of a deterrent as you might assume, because it's just one less mouth to feed, right? In the sense, I know he wasn't a great shooter, but when you're talking about where does the ball go through? Like, who is the offense run through? That changes dramatically since Ben was the guy running the offense, right? So I think if it's run by Maxey, that's a different offense. So from my perspective, that's going to be the key here is how can Joel stay healthy to offset that, and then what does that look like with a Tyrese Maxey run offense?
Yeah. By the way, Tyrese Maxey is suddenly a really good fantasy basketball pickup. Isn't he? Like, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Suddenly, he's a sneaky guy to get in there with the pick of the year, Paul George, who's just going to do everything for the Clippers in fantasy. I think you're right. And by the way, how the team starts will matter, right? If they start 8-4, 9-3, hey, man, we're fine. We can do this all day, right? But if they start 6-6, 5 and 7, then that dynamic starts. Something's got to change the dynamic, and those kind of starts might start to change that, right? Like those might be factors in what eventually breaks this stalemate.
In Philly, by the way, too. I mean, you go 6-6 in Philly. You know, that's the key thing too, is in Philly.
Fortunately, right now, I think Eagles fans are more focused on how bad, or Philly fans are more focused on how bad the Eagles are. And like that can handle their wrath for a little while. But if the Sixers start slow, it'll get noticed.
You know, it's interesting to me because I think a clear comp could be that old OKC team where you had KD, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Remember when James Harden left? What happened the next year? KD won the MVP.
Yeah.
Right. So did they go back to the finals? No. Right. But I think this is what I'm saying is Joel Embiid was a front runner in the MVP race. I think if you take out one of the key stars in that player, in that mix on that team, you actually kind of create more room for him to operate, which is kind of a strange thing to think about, right? And then I think he'll have, if he can just stay healthy, he'll have an MVP caliber season. So that's what I mean. But will the team be better? That's a great question. I don't know if the team is going to be better.
I don't know that the team is going to be better. I think you make a great point about Embiid, by the way. If he's healthy, and that's always, can he play 70 games instead of 60? If he does, he's going to probably be in that MVP conversation with, Kevin Durant and whoever else is going to be up, Luka Doncic and whoever else is in the top of that conversation. But he's going to be in that mix because of his impact on both ends of the floor. And it is his team. Personality-wise, it is his team. And I think, you could see in between his comments, like he said all the right things. Hey, I loved playing with Ben Simmons. I want him back. But there are moments where it slips where he's like, I love the drive that Jimmy Butler played. We should have tried to keep him here. But that was such a different mindset that, right? Like, I think you could see his frustration with Simmons not taking this in a, hey, I didn't do well enough. I'm frustrated. I'm going to come back next year better than ever. And instead kind of pulling back like that you can see how that frustrates Embiid.
And he's the franchise player, right? So that you never want your franchise player frustrated. No. But let me draw your attention somewhere else, Kurt. So we've seen a lot of new pieces join teams, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts on any ones that just jump out as, wow, that's a good fit. I know in the NBA GM survey, they said Kyle Lowry was a huge pickup, the best of the offseason. I would love to hear your perspective. Who's your favorite fit?
Yeah, Kyle Lowry would have been on top of my list just because he is exactly the kind of secondary playmaker and can play some defense that they need. I mean, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to be on the court. But Miami is really they're better than anybody about both getting guys in shape and then their health program has been and keeping guys healthy through getting them rest when they need it. But over the course of the season is probably on par or as good or better than anybody else in the league. That's a dangerous team come the playoffs. I think they're going to be a good, 3-4 seed in the regular season. I don't know if they're up there with Milwaukee and Brooklyn. But come the playoffs, when you've got Jimmy Butler, you've got Bam Adebayo back in the paint still. You're adding Kyle Lowry as a secondary playmaker. You've got shooters like Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero running around. That's a really good team that's going to be able to do a lot of – I think they're a real tough matchup in the playoffs because they can play a lot of ways. I really like that fit. I'm with kind of with the GMs on this one. That's my favorite pickup of the offseason. What about you?
I have to bring up LA, right? I mean, when you see what they did this offseason, with Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, the list goes on, Dwight Howard, Rondo. I would love to hear your thoughts on this because it's clearly the LeBron's team, right? Anthony Davis is clearly the one they're running the offense through. He is kind of the engine. Where does Russ fit in? And that to me is going to be the most exciting thing to watch. I'm with you. I think the Lowry thing with the Heat is most probably the best fit. But I'm very curious to see how the Lakers play out because it's just like an all-star team. But we get to see it for a whole season, and that to me is exciting as a fan. But I just don't know the practicality of it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see does Westbrook tame his game a little bit to fit with LeBron James? You don't want to take the ball out of LeBron James's hands, man. So I'm curious to see how they do that. Carmelo accepted that role in Portland. He will accept it with the Lakers. He has become a valuable bench guy. Can Russell Westbrook pick his spots? Can Frank Vogel put him out there without LeBron and AD and give him with the second unit, 10 minutes of go, time during the game and get his let him get his numbers, but also let him be Russell Westbrook. I think they're going to be able to make this work. I've got, like everybody else, I've got questions about shooting and playoff spacing and fit. But I think they've got some time to work that out. And I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. For me, is great. Look, LeBron James that's LeBron James' team. He is another guy in the MVP conversation. For them to win it all again, for them to do everything they want to do, it's about Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis is playing more center, which they are talking about doing and he's open to, if he is, when he plays center, he was first team All-NBA center 2 years ago. He is a force defensively. He can step out. He can score in the post. He can take the ball off the dribble and beat you. He can do so many things. If he has another elite season, that's what the Lakers need. To me, he's the key. He is the guy who, as much as this is LeBron's team, it's going to be, if they win another title, it's going to be Anthony Davis's title.
And I love how Russell Westbrook said, my job is to push AD tempo wise. And I think that's going to be a really fascinating, it's not point. So when you think about, someone's impact on the team, for me, Russell's impact on this team won't be on the stat sheet in points. It won't be on the stat sheet in rebounds as much. I think for me, it's about this idea of effort and pace, which I don't know how that translates to a stat sheet, to be completely honest with you. I don't even know what that looks like.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the fit too, because that's a team with 9 guys over 30. They didn't play particularly fast last year. Westbrook will push the pace. And I think the other guy to watch there, I think this is going to be a really good year for Malik Monk. I think Malik Monk is the kind of athlete and shooter that, especially coming off the bench paired with somebody like Westbrook, because it's just going to open stuff up and give him opportunities. And I think he gets pushed by Westbrook and LeBron to take advantage of them a way he may not have in previous stops.
I got to ask you two more ones. DeMar DeRozan with the Bulls.
Look, DeMar DeRozan's a very good player, but the Bulls, first off, I don't think they can stop you and me and free people watching from scoring right now. I don't think they're going to be a very good defensive team. I'm really curious to see what that offense ultimately looks like, because it's a little bit of the island of misfit toys to me. It's just, there's a lot of good players, but Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, you've got Vucevic in the paint, you've got DeMar DeRozan. I'm not sure their games mesh naturally, and I'm really curious to see how they make that work and if they can make that work and flow. And what they do is it Lonzo bringing the ball up in transition, looking for stuff, then turning it over to Zach or DeMar DeRozan in the half court. I'm curious what this ultimately looks like and how they keep everybody happy. There's a lot of talent there, but in a deep East, I'm not sure they're as good as Bulls fans think they are.
And mind you, this is important because time is ticking. Zach LaVine is saying this is an important year, not just for the franchise, but for me and my decision. And that's your franchise player. Last one I want to ask you was Kemba Walker with the New York Knicks.
I think we said this before, steal of the offseason. I love that pick. I love getting him in. Knock on wood, his knees stay healthy, and he can be on the court. If he is, this is a much better prime for the playoffs, and frankly, better Knicks team with more offensive versatility than a year ago. And Kemba Walker is still able to just light it up and score. You got Evan Fournier in there. Obviously, you've still got Julius Randle. I like this team a lot. I think they're better positioned than they were a year ago. And they're probably still going to finish lower in the standings because the East got so tough this offseason, Corey. What did you think? You're out there. You live in New York. How are Knicks fans handling this?
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement in New York, but it's this thing for me when I think about Kemba. We've seen this. I feel like we've seen this story. To me, it's can he stay healthy? Because if he can put together, much like Embiid, right? If you're just available for a full season and you're consistent, a consistent Kemba Walker is super dangerous. And when you think about that paired with the old reliable and Julius Randle, who's matured into, a very good stalwart.
All-NBA.
Yeah. Cornerstone for that franchise. He can give you a consistent performance in and out. Now, if you add another piece to that, that's that offensive firepower, that a little bit of we can get hot, and when we're hot, we're burning hot. Yeah. If you can have that piece to Julius Randle's steady on the stove, if you will, it's medium heat. It's steady, but it's good. That's all-star level. So that's going to be a really potent combination. But Kemba's just got to be consistent and healthy, and I haven't seen him be consistent and healthy in a very long time.
Yeah, I hope we get to see that. You get to see that. I think the Madison Square Garden is going to be rocking this year. It's going to be fun, and especially when Trae Young comes to town, man.
We have to end with that.